Hey, what's up everybody, this is Muth24, and today I'm taking a look at Volumes 3 and 4 of Brian K. Vaughan's Saga. This is his ongoing series that's space opera, kind of in the vein of Star Wars, and for those who don't know, he kind of explained it when it was first getting big, as that when the Star Wars prequel films came out, he knew a lot of people who were sort of complaining about them, and they didn't feel they were up to the quality of the original trilogy of films, and he felt, well, why don't we just make something ourselves? And so that's what he did with this series. It definitely has sort of the Star Wars feel in the sense that it's a much bigger universe. There's lots of species in there. He does some kind of crazy things with them. But it's also very much a space opera, space adventure series for mature readers. And the reason for that is there's a lot of blood and violence in it. There's quite a bit of adult language. There's some sexual content and other adult content in here. So keep that in mind as I'm going into this review. I might talk about that a little bit. It's not as, I think, serious or consistently mature of a tone to this story as it was with Y: The Last Man, simply because it sort of is that space fantasy, space adventure direction. But when it does pop up, it seems like it's more extreme in some situations, almost grotesque at points, I won't lie. There's some stuff where, in the first two volumes, where I was okay with it for the sake of, like, pushing this idea of, oh, it's more of an adult space fantasy story. I get that, that's fine. Volume 3, and even more specifically Volume 4, it gets to be a bit much, I felt, in the sense that, like, it's not pushing the plot so much anymore, as it is just for, I don't know, shock value to impress the audience or something. I don't know. At least in the first two volumes, like when they went to this red light district planet, it was because someone was going there on a mission. It wasn't just like, hey, look at this, there's a planet with alien prostitutes or whatever. Like, it wasn't for the sake of showing that off. It was the sake of this guy had to go there to track down someone corrupt. So I'll get more into Volume 4 in a minute here. But Volume 3 kind of follows everything that happened in Volumes 1 and 2, but starts off with some new characters. I think at the end of Volume 2 they introduced Marco's old ex, who is the lady here on the cover. And she ends up teaming up with the Will to hunt down, obviously, Marco and Alana. We also are introduced to a set of reporters, and they're kind of thrown in intermittent throughout this volume, and obviously the whole idea of there being a hybrid child between the two species is met with some skepticism, and so they sort of take this sensationalist angle to it, and that's basically what they're in there for, is to show that, you know, some people are taking it as a serious search for political parties or what have you, for bounties that are out, and other people are just doing it to make a quick buck that way. And I do like the fact that we get to see some of the more, I don't know, normal lives of some of the aliens, how they behave on a day-to-day basis, where they live and what they do and all that. That's kind of cool. I'm glad it doesn't stick to that too heavily, though. It does tend to push the action along decently enough. And we also get to see the continuation of Robot Prince 4's story, as he is similarly searching for Alana and Marco. And he's probably one of my favorite characters in the series just because he's so interesting. I like this idea of, you know, organic mechanicals, if you will. I think it's an interesting combination, especially when they show his TV screen showing different images to sort of reflect his emotions or his thoughts at the time. We also have another character that they introduced called the Brand, whose role is elaborated more on in the 4th volume, but she's kind of just shoehorned in at the end, I felt, and I know she has a bigger story coming, but it felt really clunky. I almost wish they would have waited until the 4th volume to introduce her in the same way that they do with the two reporters, because they get introduced basically right off the bat, and that gives them enough time to sort of, I don't know, have their place in this volume in particular. That they're right there at the beginning, and then they keep showing up over the course of the story. The way that this one ends, I think, is sort of a good ending point for the fact that it was quite a while between volumes 3 and 4, and it ends at a point where it's like, okay, this wraps up the story we were working on for the most part. Obviously, it's not done, the adventure that they were on, but it does a little bit of a time jump forward, and things have sort of settled down long enough for them to get to a point where Hazel, the daughter, is walking now. Now she's starting to talk, she's starting to walk. We have some artwork here in the back, too, Lion Cat, some of the aliens on the different planets, but Volume 4 picks up after that time skip with Hazel as basically a toddler now. We also get a new character, this janitor who lives in the robot kingdom, and is definitely an interesting character, but I felt like he was a little bit underutilized. He's more plot device than character, unfortunately. When we do get to see him as a character, it's great, and really dark. Not that the series has been, all rainbows and sunshine all the way through. Obviously, they're on the run from military forces and political parties, but yeah, this robot janitor definitely adds a darker tone to the story. Meanwhile, because they have the chance to sort of sit down and catch their breath for a little while, Alana ends up getting a job working on a theater production that basically broadcasts every day to, I don't know if it's across the galaxy or if it's just like a local theater troupe, but it's sort of like this superhero show mixed with like your what do you call them, General Hospital or whatever, your daytime stories, if you will, those sorts of cheesier drama shows. I am forgetting what they're even called, but you know what I'm talking about. And some of the people that she works with get her hooked on some habits that are maybe not exactly the best for a young parent. And meanwhile, Marco gets his daughter involved in dance lessons and is meeting other kids, and sort of good for her to get out and be a kid like that. And the two sort of directions that they're taking for the family kind of put a strain on one another, and it was bound to happen one way or another at some point in the series that was going to happen. We have to have these sort of natural strains on the characters to help them grow. Unfortunately, the direction they end up taking with it made me lose some respect for a couple of the characters in the series, quite a bit, and I was not very pleased with that. In fact, when I was reading this volume, the first couple chapters made me get to a point where I was almost considering dropping it entirely. And then I read through the rest of it, and I'm hooked in enough to want to read the next volume at least, but this thing's really going to have to sell itself for me to want to know what happens from here on out, because I don't know, I was never as huge on it as some people were. I know some people absolutely love this series. When I got into it, I started reading it obviously because I like Brian K. Vaughan's work on Y, and I wanted to see where he'd take a fantasy storyline, or a science fiction storyline rather, a space opera, if you will. And I enjoyed it for a little while, but these volumes, I think Volume 3 is stronger than Volume 4, but they're juggling too many characters at this point, and they're not giving sufficient time to the characters that I think they should be worried about. I mentioned that the Will was pretty important still in Volume 3. He shows up at the very, very end of Volume 4. Like, they almost forgot he existed entirely until the end of Volume 4, and that's really unfortunate because he's such an interesting character, and I think there's a lot more they can do with him. But the fact that they just sort of throw them out until the very end there. Here's some of the alternate cover art that they did. The fact that they sort of just throw them out until the very end there is really unfortunate. Those reporters that they set up in Volume 3 similarly don't have that much of a role in here. We get back to Prince Robot the Fourth some. Not as much as I would have liked. It spends more time on new characters again who ultimately don't play that big of a role in the story. All the characters that we meet in Volume 4, at least to my knowledge, are basically done by the end of Volume 4. There's like one or two that will probably stick around for part of Volume 5, maybe a little bit longer, but I feel like maybe halfway through these issues in Volume 4, Brian K. Vaughan realized he was juggling too many characters and decided, well, I need to get some of them pushed to the side and need to sort of clean up the roster that I have right now to refocus it, which is good, but it took so long for us to get to that point of, oh, hey, now these new characters don't matter again, let's get back to the old ones, and by the time we get back to the old ones, it's like, all right, Volume's done. We mentioned their names, we showed their faces, that's all we needed to do, and to me that was not satisfying at all, and it was really unfortunate, because I was looking forward to seeing more about these characters we'd already established, and I think the way that they could further complicate the story. I don't know. Like I mentioned, I like the janitor. He was fun. But again, I can't see him being terribly important much past the next volume. He's more of a simple character than I think this cast, deserves as a proper foe, if you will. Because overcoming him is ultimately going to be really easy. And that's just, I don't know. To me, Volume 4 was really disappointing. It's basically all there is to it. Like, the end of it hooked me in enough to want to read Volume 5, but if I'm being completely honest, Volume 5 will be make or break for me. If I don't like it enough, I'm just going to can this series altogether, which is really unfortunate, because I wanted to like it a lot more than I have currently. And I think the first two volumes were really strong, but I don't know. I'm just not real hot on where Volume 4 took us. So, if you're going into this with the expectation that it's going to be the quality of Y the Last Man, I'd say you're going to be disappointed. They're very different stories, don't get me wrong, but this one is not as consistent in its quality as Y was. Like, the worst part for me in Y, or the weakest point rather, was Volume 4, when it's a lot of internal monologue with Yorick and the torture sequence and all that, where it's sort of like self-discovery and I got to figure out why I'm even trying to survive in this world where all the other men are dead. But it serves its purpose, right? Like, some of the stuff in here I don't feel like has a greater purpose, or the purpose that it does have is only for in the moment. And when you're writing an ongoing series like this, maybe you can get away with it more. But that's also part of the problem with ongoing series, is I think the writers and the audience get too comfortable in the routine that they've had, that they start doing things that are sort of just not that exciting and sort of just, humdrum storylines. And that's why I think everything that I've reviewed in my comics so far, the ones that are my favorites are limited series or event series or one-offs in the form of original graphic novels or what have you. I don't know. Like I said, I think the next volume is going to be make or break for me. I'll definitely pick it up for the sake of reading it and deciding where we go from here. But yeah, I think Volume 3 was still okay. Not as good as Volumes 1 and 2, but Volume 4 was quite a letdown for me. So, unfortunately, if you're a big Saga fan and I upset you with my review there, I apologize. But that's just kind of the feelings that I had towards these, the more genuine thoughts that I had about these two volumes. So that's pretty much it for this review, and with that, I will see you guys next time.